Spiritual father, Father Antipas, Moldovan. He passed to the Lord in 1882. Father Antipas was born in 1816 in the village of Kalapodeshti, Moldova. His parents were both devout Orthodox Christians who lived in great poverty. His father, Gheorghe Lucian, served as a deacon in the village church, while his mother, Ekaterina, later entered a monastery where she took the name Elisaveta and passed away as a Schema nun. For a long time, Lucian had no children, but after his wife's fervent prayers, a son named Alexander was born. The birth of the future ascetic was marked by a special sign of God's favor. His mother gave birth without pain. Even as a child, while tending his father's sheep in a remote forest filled with poisonous snakes, he would pick them up alive without suffering any harm, which terrified the people who witnessed it. Blessed by God with great spiritual gifts, the future Father Antipas lacked ordinary natural abilities in his youth. By nature, he was very simple and extremely slow in reasoning. This duality in Father Antipas left a distinct impression on his peers. At times they were struck by something wondrous and extraordinary in him, falling to their knees before him in fear and calling him their master. At other times they mocked and beat him for his simple mindedness. For a long time, despite his utmost diligence, Father Antipas could not learn to read. Seeing his inability, his teachers even advised him to leave school and take up a trade instead. Father Antipas wept bitterly. No, he said, my only desire is to learn to read. I will devote myself to reading divine books until my death. His dedication, hard work, and prayers eventually triumphed, and the sacred books became a constant source of spiritual edification for him. While still attending school, his father passed away, leaving the family without support. As the eldest, his mother sent him to learn the book binding mastery. Courageously enduring all the hardships of living in a stranger's house as a defenseless orphan, he, with God's help, quickly became a skilled bookbinder. Upon returning to his homeland, he established his own household and became the pillar of his family. The Lucians were completely content, but the heart of the young master found no comfort in earthly things. Often, far from everyone, he would weep bitterly, wondering where to find peace for his soul, and mentally cried out to God. Cause me, O Lord, the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. Psalms 143, line 8. During one of these solitary inward conversations with himself at the age of 20, Father Antipas was suddenly illuminated by a wondrous light. This light filled his heart with inexpressible joy, and tears flowed from his eyes in streams. At that moment, as if feeling in this light a higher divine calling, Father Antipas, responding to God's summons, joyfully exclaimed, Lord, I will become a monk. But the Lord, in his providence, allowed him to endure various demonic temptations. The demons appeared to him in the form of black Ethiopians and dogs. Yet, at the sign of the cross, they instantly disappeared like lightning. At times, they took on other hideous and diverse forms, making terrifying noises and causing great fear and dread in his soul. Before these demonic temptations began, he often heard a voice in the air warning him, prepare yourself, a temptation is coming. Besides these demonic trials, Father Antipas also endured much sorrow and reproach from people who opposed him for his straightforwardness and unrestrained zeal for piety. Thus, through trials both from the right hand and the left, he ascended the steps of the ladder of spiritual perfection. One night, he quietly left his home and set out for the renowned Nyamts monastery in Moldova. There, in the cathedral church, he threw himself in tears before the wonder-working icon of the Mother of God. The church was completely empty when suddenly a noise arose. The curtain covering the holy icon drew back on its own, and overcome with emotion and indescribable joy, he pressed his lips to the icon. Though he was graciously comforted in the church, Father Antipas left the abbot's cell in deep sorrow when, despite all his pleas, he was firmly refused to enter the Nyamts monastery. He then made his way to Wallachia, where a small monastery welcomed the wanderer within its peaceful walls. For over 2 years, he labored there with complete self-denial in monastic obediences. His life was filled with hardships and deprivation. He was not given monastic clothing, nor did he have a cell. Exhausted, he would fall asleep wherever he could, in the fields, on the kitchen floor. Once having fallen asleep on a hay in the field, he was covered by snow. Half frozen, he was barely brought back to consciousness. Alongside with the bodily ascetic feats, vigils, and fasting, the young ascetic combined noetic prayer, which he learned from Hieromonk Gideon, who had labored in seclusion near the monastery for about 30 years. Father Antipas' strict and self-denying life sharply contrasted with the general monastic routine. His spiritual father advised him to go to Mount Athos. Father Antipas's heart, too, longed for the holy mountain. Yet, even at the first steps of his ascetic journey, he demonstrated spiritual discernment, the principal mark of true ascetic, and in resolving his uncertainty, he wished to hear the counsel of an elder experienced in spiritual life. At that time, Archimandrite Demetrius, the abbot of Brazi Monastery, was renowned in Moldova for his great ascetic feats and spiritual wisdom. Before becoming an abbot, he had led a strict hermit's life in a remote forest. It was there that he accidentally discovered a vessel buried in the ground, filled with gold coins. Alongside the vessel was a note explaining that the money belonged to the Metropolitan Dositheos of Moldova, who had hidden it after learning of his inevitable martyrdom at the hands of the Turks. The note further stated that whoever found this treasure was obliged to build a monastery and 3 skeets with it. Upon the completion of the third skeet, the martyr wrote, "My relics will be discovered." Having announced his miraculous discovery to the Metropolitan of Moldova, Father Demetrius, with his blessing, zealously set about fulfilling the last will of the blessed Metropolitan Dositheos. A magnificent monastery resembling Nyam's monastery was erected. After completing the construction of the third and final skeet, Father Demetrius ordered that a grave be dug for himself within the skeet's enclosure. On the day of the skeet church consecration, when Father Demetrius arrived, he was informed that the grave he had ordered was collapsing. In his presence, they began to dig deeper and discovered a reliquary containing the relics of the blessed Metropolitan Dositheos. "I was granted the honor to see these relics," Father Antipas would say, "and I venerated them. A fragrance emanated from them." It was to this Archimandrite Demetrius that Father Antipas turned for spiritual guidance. Generally, Father Demetrius discouraged those who wished to go to Mount Athos. However, to everyone's surprise, he agreed to let Father Antipas go. adding that he would personally tonsure him into the monastic life. After his tonsure, Father Antipas set out for Mount Athos. At that time, in one of the remote Athonite cells, two of his fellow countrymen, Moldovan Hieromonks Niphon and Nectarius, were laboring in asceticism. Father Antipas wished to become their disciple, but the experienced elders replied to his request, "You have only recently received the monastic mantle, and you must first labor in obedience within a monastery." Obeying their counsel, Father Antipas joined Sphigmenum monastery, where he labored in the monastery kitchen about 3 years. During this time, he faced a most severe and dangerous temptation for an ascetic. For an entire year, the noetic prayer deserted him, and with it all divine consolations ceased. His mind and heart were filled with overwhelming darkness and sorrow. Only his steadfast trust in the intercession of the Mother of God preserved him from falling into despair. The period of obedience and testing had come to an end, and the Moldovan elders accepted their brother into higher ascetic labors in the desert. "Now it's time for you to be clothed in the great schema. I will tonsure you," Father Niphon once said to Father Antipas. "I am ready with great joy to accept the schema," replied Father Antipas, "but I fear that once I do, you won't let me go alone in the desert." "Of course I won't let you go," Father Niphon said. "We need you." At that time, Father Niphon had already begun to conceive the idea of establishing an independent Moldovan skit on Mount Athos. He realized that Father Antipas would be of great help in this endeavor, which is why he wished to torture him himself, to bind him spiritually, as was the custom forever. Father Antipas understood the elders' intentions, and this weighed heavily on him. In their indecision about the schema, both the elder and the disciple decided to turn to Hieromonk Antony, their common spiritual guide. He sided with Father Antipas, and on his advice, Father Antipas was tonsured and granted full freedom to live a solitary hermitic life. Reluctantly, Father Niphon led his monk to go into the desert. This reluctance was even outwardly evident. He gave him absolutely nothing of what was typically necessary for an initial hermitic settlement. Father Antipas entered the crumbling hermit's hut empty-handed. It was completely bare, except for a small icon of the Mother of God that he found on a small shelf in the front corner. The icon was so blackened from years of soot that the image was barely discernible. Father Antipas was inexpressibly overjoyed by this discovery. He felt as if he had found a priceless treasure. Without delay, he took the icon to his acquaintance, the iconographer Hierodeacon Paisius, who had moved from the holy Kiev hills to Athos. He asked him to carefully clean the icon without damaging it or retouching the paint in any way. At first, Father Paisius refused to take the icon under such conditions, but after persistent pleas from Father Antipas, he agreed. After some time, he returned the icon looking completely new, solemnly swearing that it had become so simply from the gentle cleaning. This phenomenon greatly astonished him. Thus, emerging miraculously from years of darkness, the icon of the Mother of God later glorified itself through many gracious signs. Until the very destruction of the Vala monastery, the icon was preserved there as a great relic. It was impossible to live in the dilapidated hut, but Father Antipas had no means to repair it. One day, as he was walking through the desert, an unknown monk stopped him. "Father, Some kind people gave me 5 gold coins and asked me to give them to the poorest hermit I could find. After praying, I decided to give them to the first person I met. Take them, you must need them. With a great gratitude, feeling it as from the hands of God, Father Antipas accepted the money. He then invited a poor cell carpenter to come and help repair his hut. The work went well for 4 days. However, on the fifth day, the carpenter fell seriously ill with a violent cholera attack, collapsing not far from the hut and experiencing violent spasms. Father Antipas was deeply alarmed. Unable to drag the sick man into his hut, in a moment of inexplicable inspiration, he took the icon of the Mother of God, placing it on a raised surface in front of the prostrate carpenter. Then he retreated deep into the forest, praying earnestly for the man's healing. He prayed for a long time. When he returned to his hut, he was astonished and filled with great joy to find the man, who had been in dire condition, now completely healed and working. Your icon healed me, the carpenter explained to Father Antipas. It is miraculous. I was lying as though dead, when suddenly I felt a warm, life-giving breath coming from the icon. I felt completely warmed and in an instant stood up, healthy and restored. In a short time, Father Antipas' cell was furnished, and his days started to pass peacefully. When necessary, the hermit combined his spiritual asceticism with servant handiwork, making wooden spoons that he sold in Caries to support himself. He sought spiritual counsel from Hieromonk Leontius, who lived in the Lacoskit. Even thereafter, he remained in close spiritual fellowship with him, and it was only with his blessing that he dared to take new steps. Meanwhile, Father Nifon's idea of establishing a Moldovan skit gradually began to materialize. In Moldova, in the city of Iași, an outbuilding had already been arranged for them. On Athos, a land was purchased on which skitty buildings were quickly erected, and the number of brethren was growing. Then the founding fathers invited Father Antipas to join them as collaborators, and following the counsel of the spiritual fathers, he agreed. He was ordained as a hierodeacon, then quickly as a hieromonk, and was made the cell keeper. Although his position was apparently modest, Father Antipas, as much as his strength allowed, zealously upheld the cenobitic rules with all his might. One day during the common meal, Father Niphon had given a blessing to the cell keeper, instructing him to prepare a separate dish for himself and for a guest. The cell keeper did not prepare any such dish, and the abbot became angry, ordering him to rise and perform prostrations. I will perform my prostrations with joy, the cell keeper replied, but please forgive me. I did it with a good purpose, to avoid any stumbling or temptation among the brethren. Since you yourself have instituted good practices according to the rules of the Holy Fathers, so that they are not violated, because the abbot must be an example for everyone in everything. Only then will our cenobitic life be solid and secure. Then, once Father Niphon was completely calmed, he thanked Father Antipas for his prudent zeal. The responsibilities of managing the skit prompted Father Niphon to leave for Moldavia for 3 years. During this time, all aspects of the skit's cenobitic life were entrusted to Father Antipas. Later, he was also given the right to fulfill the duties of a spiritual father. To be continued. See you in the next